Hello, everybody. Welcome to the May edition of the Booktube Chicks Book Club. This month, we read The Magnolia Sword, A Ballad of Mulan by Sherry Thomas that Kathleen is holding up for us. We are going to be chatting about this book for the next hour or so. The way our live shows work is first we will have a synopsis of the book, and then we will chat about our initial thoughts and our ratings. And that is spoiler free for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then we will go into spoilers for the book. Um, so let's go ahead and start with a synopsis. Kat, would you like to do the synopsis?
I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's a retelling of Mulan. I did feel like Sherry Thomas took creative liberty, I don't know how to say it, with this story of Mulan, because there were, I guess, I don't know. I think she went more off of the legend of Mulan. I don't personally
know. The Ballad of Mulan.
Right, yeah. So I don't know exactly the actual story of the legend of the Ballad of Mulan. But she did obviously take creative differences from the actual story that we all know, which is the Disney story, the Disney version of the story. But basically, Mulan is the elder daughter of her family, and they are, I apologize, I forget which dynasty we are in, but they're obviously the Hans are invading, and they are. The emperor has requested that all families provide one able-bodied male from every family to fight in the war. And the only able-bodied male in Mulan's family is her father, who is actually paralyzed, so he can't really fight. And however, in this story, Mulan supposedly had, well, not supposedly, she had a twin brother, but her twin brother perished a long time ago. He died, and so people still believe he exists because her father never actually told anybody that he's no longer alive. So she takes on the I guess identity of the fact of her twin brother. We'll go more into details later because that's going into spoilery, but and that's how the story starts. So she takes her father's or her brother's place on the crisp, and yeah, and we all know the rest of the story. I guess I'll start with my personal thoughts. I finished this book last night. I honestly don't know how I feel about the book, because Mulan, in terms of the Disney stories itself, not exactly the ballad, the legend of Mulan. The Disney story Mulan is my favorite Disney story. I love how strong she is. I do love her character. I love that, her story gives me chills. Like in the end, when she is a woman in this place where, in this world where, it's very patriarchal, you give emphasis more to men. And, the fact that, the emperor himself at the end of the movie bows down to Mulan herself. And then her relationship with her father at the very end always brings me chills. I love Mulan to death. So I tried really hard to go into this book not expecting the Disney version of Mulan, and it was really hard. There were things about the story that I wasn't crazy about. There were things about the story that I wished the author touched upon more. But overall, I do feel personally that it was a strong Mulan retelling. And but again, I still don't know how I feel about the story itself, and I don't know what I'm going to rate it. It is hovering around a 3.5 to 4 stars. I just don't know where I'm going to place it at.
Okay, I agree that it was difficult to separate the Disney movie from reading it, and that's also one of my favorite Disney movies. The amount of times I've watched that movie is ridiculous. And I think I had certain expectations that weren't met, but it feels unfair to me to dock the book stars for those expectations, because considering the time frame that the story is being told in, and the location, and like, you know, cultural aspects of it, I think some of my expectations were unfair. Um, but I absolutely loved how much history was in it. Like, you could tell that the author like just put a lot of research in it, and it made me want to, well, first of all, it made me feel ignorant as hell. Like, and it made me want to look into more about Chinese history, just so I could better understand some of the things that were happening in the story and in the book. But I loved the way it was written. I loved the unique elements that she wove in, and she was still able to create a lot of tension between the two love interests, I feel like. And I personally gave it, like, are we doing ratings? Am I saying rating? I think, I'm pretty sure I gave it 5 stars.
So for me, I listened to the audiobook, and I don't think I necessarily went in with expectations of the Disney movie, but I kind of went in not expecting anything. For me, it ended up being very middle of the road, and then there were some aspects that I did find interesting, that I can't really talk about because they're spoilers. I think I ended up settling on a 3.5, because a 3 for me is, an okay book, but it wasn't it wasn't to the point where I'm like, okay, I really enjoyed this book, which would have been a 4. It was kind of like hovering in the middle, so I settled on the 3.5. Um, I made the mistake of I watched the live action Mulan one night, like, while I had been reading the book, and then after I'd finished the movie, I couldn't separate certain elements. I was like, "Wait, was that the movie or was that in the book?" So I made that mistake, and I don't recommend doing that. Um, but I think there were certain elements that were interesting to me. Um, and I'm glad I didn't set any expectations for myself with this book, or whether I wasn't gonna like it or I was gonna love it or stuff like that. Um, so I guess we can go ahead and go into spoilers. I didn't write down any questions to ask, so if anybody has a place they would like to start at or anything specific they wanted to talk about.
Well, I don't know if I was expecting there to be so much family drama. Like, I think that kind of blew me away. There was a lot of it, and then it really went against how I felt about Mulan's father, so I had trouble processing. And like, I feel like I spent the whole book being like, no, there has to be a rational explanation for what they were accusing him of. And so towards the end, when it like turned out that it was accurate that he had done that, like, I couldn't even. Like,
I think the part about the father is probably my number one hated thing about this book, because again, I am sorry, but I cannot separate Disney version of Mulan with this book. And again, I don't know the actual Ballad of Mulan. I don't know if she took this from the actual, the Legend of Mulan. But in the Disney version, it was a strained relationship, but it was also a very affectionate relationship with her dad, because she wanted so hard to impress him. And in this book, she does, she with her sword fighting and her, martial arts, she tries so hard just to make sure that her dad is proud. But in the end, at the end of Disney Mulan, we have, like, she's giving these things to her. Look, Dad, the emperor gave me the sword. Look, Dad, he bestowed me this honor, to bring honor to the family. And he's like, the greatest honor of all is having you for a daughter. And the fact that there was not this in the book, he does in a way say, like, he tells his story and he says, the fact that you were alive made me more happy than anything, than having 10 sons. That was sweet. but it wasn't the connection, like the emotional connection that the Disney movie gave. Like it just felt very, very, how should I put it? It just didn't have that, oh my God, that movement. Like I wasn't moved by the moment, you know. It just felt like, oh yeah, you know, I was happy you were alive, you know. Yeah, I'm proud of you. And it just felt like he was trying to atone for what he did. I don't know. It's just the whole moment felt about him instead of being about them and their relationship. And like the whole thing with the dad is the one thing that I disliked about this book, and that's why I didn't rate it a 5-star like you did, Desiree, because I did enjoy the book, but the entire relationship that she had with her dad really pissed me off.
You know, I found that it was that family rivalry that ended up being like an integral part of the plot. That's what I found to be interesting, because I definitely wanted to know what was going on, especially once we figured out that the prince that she had been with the whole time, or was he a prince? I can't remember. Was the person that she was supposed to have this duel with, and how like their families were like woven together through this, which I think that's what really kept me wanting to listen and wanting to know what was happening. um I had a second part to that thought. Hold on. Somebody come back to me. I'll think on that again.
So the thing that kept me going, and not to say that other parts weren't interesting, because they were, and I really loved the history, and I loved, you know, the rivalry between the families, but the thing that kept me turning the pages was the romance. So that's why when I got to the end of it, I was like nothing. Like there was nothing. There was no kiss, no like no hug. No, I don't know. I wanted something.
I for once agree with you on the romance. I was like, in the end, I was like, really? Like you build this up and then really? And so but yeah, I agree. The romance, it was cute. I do feel I liked that she didn't take the approach of the like an insta love. Like I personally hate insta love, but I feel like some, especially when it's a like a one shot, like a kind of book, a one book story, the authors are too happy to rush towards the romance. But I do feel like this was like a slow build towards the romance. And you know, the fact that he knew from the very beginning that she was a woman, it kind of made the romance seem more real, personally, to me. But yeah, I do agree with you, Desiree. The ending was kind of like a little disappointing in the romance department.
It was just a super, super slow burn, which I don't
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
But, you know, and then like I had to think about it, because that was one of the reasons I was going to give it a 4, because I was like, you made me read all those pages and I got nothing at the end. but like, you know, we're talking about like 1700s China. So like, I'm pretty sure people aren't just hooking up before marriage. Like, so it just seemed unfair to dock it points for that.
You know, one thing that I really liked at the end when she's with the emperor, even though we only interacted with him for a couple of pages, I liked how he was like, "Oh, I will find you a beautiful wife," and the Mulan was like, "Well, thank you, sir," but and then he goes, "Oh, a beautiful husband then." And I just loved that so much. That really like brought me back to the Disney version.
I agree. I love that they kept that kind of like similar to the Disney version, where in the Disney version he was open to the fact that she was a woman, or accepting, and then in the book the same thing. He was very accepting of the fact that she was a woman. And yeah, that was the one part that was very reminiscent of the movie, and I really enjoyed.
And then I like how I can't even remember his name. The male character told the emperor that he would only let him find him a match if Mulan said no first. So I really liked how like having that, I guess, family battle or whatever you want to call it, instead of ending in the duel, ended in a match and kind of like mending. Well, we're assuming it's a match, I guess, mending the relationship. was really interesting.
I don't want to jump like towards all the ending stuff. I'm like trying to think of other things. I was
Yeah.
A little surprised by the gay characters. Um I you know, again, I wasn't alive in the 1700s or living in China, so I'm just wondering what it would have been like during that time. Um but it was so normalized. It was just kind of interesting, and I think there was more than like one couple. I think there was like two gay couples ish, or at least they had crushes on each other or something. So that was nice to see, just having that normalized.
Yeah. But like again, if she's going for historically accurate, we would need to look into whether this was accepted back in this era. But I don't know. Again, this is a fiction book. I don't know how accurate, like historically accurate, she wants to be with this story. But yeah, I do agree. There were a lot of more things that were accepting than I was expecting.
Like that was seemed more accepted than like Mulan being a warrior and a
Right.
woman, which is like, okay.
I feel like well, I'm not sure how much I would consider this a fantasy because it's listed on Goodreads as like it's YA, historical fiction, retelling, fantasy, and I'm like, I don't know about the
I
fantasy
don't think
elements.
it's definitely not a fantasy.
No, especially because this goes back to me getting confused with the live action Mulan.
That was a
And
fantasy.
because I remember I texted you, Desiree, and I said, "How is this a fantasy?" But
Yeah,
we were
because
talking
I
about
did.
the movie.
Yeah, but I did see people listing it on crap. What's that other book site? Not not Goodreads. It's a different one.
Storygraph.
Yeah, people were listing it on Storygraph as a fantasy.
Really, it's not. There's not even like any of like the Disney version of fantasy, like with the dragon and the ancestors. It was not present in this movies. I mean, in this book. So
unless they were calling it fantasy because it was based on like the ballad and lore of Mulan, which may not have actually existed, but
again, I don't see any fantasy in it. For me, it was. I don't even know what I just say it's a retelling, but I don't even know what other genre you could put it in.
Definitely historical fiction retelling.
Well, yeah, historical fiction retelling. I don't know.
What did you guys think of like the beginning of the book? Because I feel like as soon as you start reading it, you're instantly put in like the middle of action, and I was like, "Oh, what's going on?"
Speaking of the beginning, where's her match? Like she went to the what is it, that lady's name? The wedding matchmaker, the matchmaker.
A matchmaker.
She was never there, and I'm like, that's the one. That's one of the best parts. Again, she's going off of the actual ballad of Mulan, so I don't know if that happened, but still, I was kind of hoping for at least a little bit of a scene of her parents trying to marry her off, and it did not happen, and I was slightly disappointed.
Well, something that I thought was interesting was because again in the cartoon, she kind of goes behind her father's back and leaves to take his place, whereas in the book, he knew she was going in his stead. Like her dad knew, and so that was a kind of different aspect
say that again.
of it. Her dad knew that she was going. Like in the movie, he didn't know, and she went behind his back and took his gear and left. But in the book, he knew that she was going to the military thing.
Did he?
Yeah.
Yeah, because she came back. She had already bought a horse and came back and was like, this is what's going on. And I don't know, he was like, you must do what you need to do or something like that.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
And I thought he like gave her the sword and everything. I might be misremembering, but I thought that's what happened because I was like, what?
No, I think
I think
no,
he's
you're
just giving
right.
her his blessing.
No, you're right.
Wait, Kat, you're muted, but I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say that you were right. That did happen. Because I remember thinking about it, the fact that he knew that she was leaving, that he was allowing her to go. Whereas in the movie and the original Disney um, animated movie, she just left in the middle of the night. And I remember specifically, I think it was in the movie, the actual live action movie, that her mother wanted to go get her, and he said no because he didn't want to reveal who she is.
I also thought it was interesting in this one, her mother has passed away, but there's this other woman who's, I don't know if she's like a maid or something. I can't remember the name either.
Isn't it her aunt or something?
Is it Nan? She had a son too, but for some reason that son couldn't go to the war.
Because he's too young. He was like he was like 9 years old.
No, not that one. There was another.
Oh, he's like mentally challenged from what I gathered, and they mentioned something about how he couldn't go like a full day without being near his mother, otherwise he'll like melt down or something. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's her aunt, but I'm not sure.
Okay, I didn't know what the relationship was, because at first I thought that was her mom, and then they had mentioned that her mom was dead. So
yeah, I remember that. And then she had a little brother, and the little brother was too young to go, so she can't. So she was basically the only one who had to step up.
And then she had the twin brother, but he's dead.
Correct. Yes.
Listen, I had a really hard time digesting that her dad fought a woman in his generation's duel, and he was supposed to marry her sister, and then he poisoned her. What?
I don't really like. I don't, honestly, I haven't wrapped my head around that version of the story because I don't really understand it. And what bothers me is the fact that this is East Asia, so it's very honor bound, and the fact that he did this, and obviously he was in danger, his life was in danger, his family was in danger, and he ran. To me personally, it seemed very cowardly, and it didn't seem. I'm not saying people didn't do it back then, but it just didn't seem realistic enough for me. So,
I mean,
because the whole point of Mulan, she went off to war for her family's honor, and again, this happened, and I just, again, I don't fully understand the details of what happened, but it just seemed to me that it was a very cowardly thing to do instead of owning up to the fact that he did kill. And I understand why he did it. He thought he was gonna die, but so he did something shady.
Cat got stuck.
A cowardly thing to do, and a lady that's very.
Let Cat know she froze.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't know if you could still hear me or not. Oh, there.
Okay.
I think you're back.
You froze for a second, Cat.
Yeah, we heard very cowardly.
You guys froze for me. I think my internet dropped. Sorry. No, I was just gonna say I just saw in a book where a society is very driven by honor. It seemed to me like a very cowardly act. Now, I don't know what you guys thought about it, but that was just how I took it.
I mean, that's part of the reason why I had such trouble processing it, but I guess the fact that they because he was also not going to honor the commitment of marriage where he was set up with the sister. And so, like, he did it because he loved Mulan's mother. And I mean, if you're gonna do something like that, I guess love is the best reason to do it. But I don't know. It was like I spent the whole book being like, no, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. like I just wanted there to be an explanation. Like I was like, somebody's got the story wrong. There's a misunderstanding. They're gonna figure it out by the end. And I was like, what? He really used poison on her? What the hell?
And that's the thing. He says it that he thought that the lady was gonna kill him, and so he poisoned her. So that's isn't poison supposed to be another act of cowardice? Like it's the cowardly way of killing somebody. So again, all these things are not like, to me personally, it just I like the book, but it's just not perfect. And I feel like a lot of the things about Mulan's story she missed. And because Mulan's story was about honor and, you know, the fact that she's a woman in a man's army, she's trying to do it for her family. It's about family, it's about honor. And the fact that her dad did all these things and he's not taking accountability for it. In fact, he's suffering for it. And the family of the person that he's wronged, like, for example, the prince, he actually forgave her father. And I'm just like, you know, they're acting more with honor than you are. And I don't know, it's just, I'm not saying that I want him to die for what he did. I just wish that he would have, you know, he already feels bad for it. I just wish he would have taken accountability, because that's how I feel this society would have acted because of the whole honor system.
I mean, I think the reasoning was that the woman he was fighting was only supposed to fight for the sword, but she got carried away and she started trying to fight to the death. And that's why he acted the way he acted. Because at that point, she was like out of bounds, I guess. But
correct. But that's her dishonoring her name and her family. And so he stooped down to her level. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, at that point, you're talking about life and death. I don't know if I want to choose death. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that was the thing, though, to die honorably.
Like, if he like took the sword and he like beheaded her, that would be one thing. But the fact that he used poison, and I'm just like, okay. But
and he also knew everything that he did, and he still kept the sword. Like he didn't even give it up. Like she officially won, but he kept the sword.
Again, the Mulan's dad, I'm going to cut him out of this story because everything else was good. Everything else I enjoyed except Mulan's dad and her relationship with her, because like the ending, like the fact that I didn't get that move, you know, that moving scene, it bothers me. So
how did you feel about her internal dialogue? Because I felt like she was insecure and she had reasons to be insecure, but at times it felt like a lot. Like it felt like too much.
Okay,
it was like
an example.
I don't know if I can, but like it's kind of like, girl, you just did these things. Like, why are you pooping on yourself? Why are you like, you know, not trusting who you are and what you're capable of when you just did it? Like there was just a lot of examples like that where I felt like, okay, we get it. You're not your brother. You wish you were. You think your dad expects you to be. But it was just like constantly her voice just being, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if I'm like.
I don't think I noticed it too much, to be honest. Yeah, the one part I was a little bit frustrated, but I also understand that people can freeze in times of great stress, was that one moment where they were ambushed. And, you know, it was her first time fighting where she could actually lose her life. And she mentioned this. That was her first time, you know, fighting something that was, and she just froze. And I was like, listen, move. I was like, oh my gosh, if she doesn't move, I'm going to, like, it frustrated me. The fact that she kept telling herself, I need to move, but she didn't move. But that was the only time it ever frustrated me. I don't think I noticed any other time of her being insecure, but she's actually just, you know, really skilled.
I was really curious, Kat, how you were enjoying the book, Because I knew how Desiree was because she finished it early on in the month, and I knew how I felt, but I feel like I hadn't heard anything from you, so I was like, I wonder if she's enjoying it. Like, I knew you loved Mulan, so I wasn't sure how you were gonna feel about it.
I also started the book really late. I started reading it on Thursday night, so and then I finished it. So I was like reading really fast, like 100 pages a day to try to get it to today, and I finally finished it last night. So
I would like to reread this because I feel like, my expectation of waiting for the romance to happen really interfered with my ability to process everything else that was actually happening. And so I would like to try to reread it knowing and having no expectations of the romance, just letting things unfold so that I could focus on all the family drama and all the lore with the swords and, the history happening at the time, stuff like that.
yeah. I honestly, I really wish that I went into this book that I would be able to separate the actual story, the actual book with the actual Disney version of Mulan and the movie and everything I know about Mulan. But it was very difficult, and that's probably affecting how I feel about this person, about this book. But I don't think I don't know if I'll reread it.
I will say I'm glad that I did read it because, I was thinking about how there's not that many Mulan retellings that I know of.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even less that I've read. I think this is the second Mulan retelling I've ever read. So I am glad that I read it.
Yeah.
Even if it was just very middle of the road for me.
Yeah, and the thing is also, I went into this book with high expectations because I loved Mulan so much, and so I just wish I was able to separate it and give this book a fair shot, but I was really having a difficult time separating it. Like I was critiquing everything, like in the beginning, the fact that there was no matchmaker, her relationship with her dad, and the ending with her dad just pissed me off. So everything about her dad pissed me off. So if I honestly wish I could have read this book without knowing anything about Mulan, without ever having seen the Disney version of Mulan and the movies and everything about it. And I feel like that would have been my most unbiased reading of this book, but unfortunately I can't go back.
Does anybody have anything else they want to say about the book?
There's another Mulan retelling that's supposed to be happening soon. I was trying to look for the title, but it's like something Sun. I don't know. I'd have to go back and like really search for it, but it sounded interesting. In regards to this story, again, I think it did what it set out to do, and to me, it is clearly a historical fiction. And if you can appreciate it for that, then I don't know. I think it was such a great book because what can you expect from a historical fiction other than it's very much rooted in history? And she obviously the author obviously did her work to make sure that it was indicative of that.
I actually thought about something regarding the story. There were so many characters. I feel like this would have been a book, like an audiobook, that would have greatly benefited from a full cast. I don't know if any of you use the audiobook, but I find that it was very hard to keep all the characters separate, and I had a really hard time with that.
I agree. So I read this book with the audiobook. I usually, like 99% of the books that I read are with the audiobook, unless the audiobook doesn't exist. That would be the only time I would ever read a book without the audiobook. But I agree with you. Honestly, I don't remember half the characters except Mulan. I don't even know what Mulan's father's name is. The prince, and he's called the princeling in a lot of the so I don't actually know his name. I think it's like Kai or something. Yeah, Kai. And then the emperor, if he has a name, I have no idea. The aunt, the people that follow them into battle, I have absolutely no clue what their name is. I don't remember. But yeah, I agree with you. This would have benefited from a full cast because it would have been easier to distinguish them. And not that I think the characters were, they had their own personalities. I do think the author did a great job in separating, making sure that each individual voice was a different voice. But I feel like I do agree with you. Just for easement of remembering names, it would have been nice to have a full cast.
Yeah, because I just read a different audiobook. I finished it today, and that had a full cast of people for it, and it didn't even need it. But this one, it definitely
or at least at least two different voices, because then with two different actors there would be different voices that they could do, but like one narrator narrating all those voices. And I'm not saying there was a huge number of characters, but there is a significant amount. It would have been nice to at least have one additional narrator to the story.
I can't remember, but it was told in third person, right? I think.
No, it's told in first person.
Okay. I prefer books that way.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else I want to add.
Me neither. This was like one of those books that I read in the middle of the month, and then I read more stuff and promptly forgot about it.
Well, I think it was really good, and everybody should go get it. Just expect historical fiction.
Yeah, so I thought it was also very good. The one thing is if you're expecting a Mulan Disney version of Mulan, do not read this book, or you won't necessarily be disappointed by the story, but you will be disappointed at the fact that there's a lot of things missing. Obviously, there's nothing to do with the ancestors. I don't think they're even mentioned in this book, and the ancestors were a big part of Disney version of Mulan. Her relationship with her dad was weird to me personally. Her dad in general was weird. His whole story arc was weird. There was no matchmaker in the beginning. Yeah,
there's no Mushu.
There's no Mushu. There's no the horse, the imperial horse that helps Mulan in the movie. Yeah, it's just there's no bowing to Mulan at the end with the emperor bowing. No, there was a nice little moment between the emperor and Mulan, but there was no bowing. Yeah, so don't expect Disney's version of Mulan. If you are able to separate Disney's version of Mulan and read this book without expecting that, I think you would really enjoy it. I personally had a hard time because I so love Disney's version of Mulan so much with all my heart. So it's difficult for me to separate it. But I do think that the book is a strong Mulan retelling. And if you know anything about the actual ballad of Mulan, and then I think you enjoy it even more. I personally don't know anything about it. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and rate this a 4-star, just because if she throws out the whole version of the whole story arc with the dad, I think I would enjoy the book more. So if I can separate that from my head, I think this is a solid 4-star for me.
I agree with everything that Kat said, except mine is a 3.5. And I feel like the most interesting part of this book for me was the family rivalry, or the rivalry between the two families, and the budding, I guess the only thing to call it is a friendship, because there wasn't really romance, the budding friendship between the prince and Mulan, and how it all ended, where
I don't know, there was still a romance. It was just like a non-physical one.
Yes, but when you think about it, she was disguised as a man, and she had to keep it up for everybody else. So
yeah, but like I loved how well she was able to convey how much they cared about each other without any kind of physical stuff happening. Like the way, Mulan's heart would race when he was around, or how much she would just be concerned if he knew and if she could tell him her secret. And then when she did finally tell him, like, I felt like that was really nice. So.
Well, I'm sure this book is for somebody, but it's not for me. How's that? Not that it was bad. It was just very middle of the road for me. Do we have anything else we want to add before we talk about next month?
I do want to add one thing else. This book also lacked action. I feel like the actual, again, I keep comparing it to the movie and I'm sorry, but the actual movie had a lot of fight scenes. There were moments where she's like practicing, which was really interesting to read, but the actual fight scene that happened, besides the one scene where she froze, was at the very end when they were protecting the emperor, and there was no fireworks like in the movie where she threw a firework at the bad guy. There's none of that. But yeah, just saying.
So really, just go watch the movie, basically.
Yeah, if you want action, go watch the Disney version.
Okay, excuse me. So next month, in June, we're reading a book that I'm really excited about, and we're going to be reading Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. I'm really excited to see, Kat, what you think of this book, because I feel like this isn't something that you would normally read. So I'm really excited.
Okay.
Our live show is going to be on Sunday, June 27th at 6 p.m. Eastern on this channel. What else are we doing this month? Oh, Pages and Pals is going to be the week before on Saturday, June 19th at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Correct.
Does anybody else have any other announcements they want to make?
Readerama.
If anybody's participating in Readerama, that starts on June 6th and goes to June 12th. We're going to have a kickoff live on June 6th at 5 p.m. Eastern on this channel as well. And then there's going to be a bunch of live shows throughout the week on my channel, Kat's channel, Alex from Pucks and Paperbacks, as well as the Readerama Instagram. There's a bunch of stuff. I have like 6 live shows throughout the whole month of June. I think that's it. Does anybody have anything else they want to add? All right. So thank you to everybody for joining us. Thank you to Desiree and Kat. And we will see you guys next month for the Honey Girl live show. Bye.